I apologize for the delay. We have run into a problem with a couple of our panelists not having made it, so we were hoping that they would show up here. But we're going to move forward with the evening, and I thank you for your patience. My name is Robbie Luckett. I'm the director of the Margaret Walker Center for the Study of the African American Experience here at Jackson State University. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you to our annual Robert Clark Symposium that honors the legacy of the Honorable Robert Clark, the first African American elected to the Mississippi House of Representatives since Reconstruction. And we are very proud to have Speaker Clark with us here again tonight. And tonight's program certainly represents Speaker Clark and his legacy, and we are very proud to put it on for you tonight, and very happy to have all of you here. The Margaret Walker Center is both a museum and archive dedicated to the African American experience. Founded in 1968 as the Institute for the Study of the History, Life, and Culture of Black People by Dr. Margaret Walker Alexander, renowned English professor and writer of classic works like Jubilee and For My People. Today we continue that academic and artistic legacy through the work that we do as an archive with more than 40 manuscript collections with nearly 2,000 oral histories, but also as a museum of the African American experience, as a place that does public programming like the event that you are attending tonight. Without further ado, though, I want to invite the Honorable Robert Clark up to say a few words of welcome of his own and begin our event tonight. Speaker Clark.
Thank you, Dr. Luckett. First of all, to our President in our absence, and to all of you that are here this evening, we're proud that you have come to share this opportunity with us. And I want to tell you, before I get started, that we're looking for something out of you. The purpose of the Robert Clark Institute is to develop a future for future generations. 40 years ago, I said this today, I used to like to read the book of Exodus because it dealt with Moses dwelling in the wilderness for 40 years. And I used to ask my father, Dad, how did Moses stay in the wilderness for 40 years? But this year, exactly 40 years ago, the African American elected officials from across the United States of America met in Gary, Indiana, and we formulated an organization. And the purpose of that organization was to develop a roadmap to the future for African Americans. But 40 years later, we are not any closer to that map to the future than we were then. And that's why it came to my mind and on my heart for us to get back to where I think we should be. At most of these meetings, we meet and we talk about the civil rights workers who had passed, and I don't care what we said about them, we could not say enough. Everything good that is said about Dr. Henry is deserving. Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer is deserving. Medgar Evers, it is deserving. But what's on my mind and on my heart, what would they want us to do today if they were here? What would they want us to do? I think they would want us to do more than get up and just talk about them and how great they were. I think they would want us to look at the situation and see what the situation is and compare it to their thoughts, and then let us go from there. And that is why we are here this evening. And each of you that are here, you are invited to be a part of this think tank to help us develop this future for future generations. And this is a great task. No one organization can do it. No one individual can do it. But I'm calling upon the government, the governor of the state of Mississippi, the legislators, and every other organization to join forces with us and let us move forward. And when we move the African Americans forward, we are going to be moving Mississippi forward. For example, 3 years ago, when the Delta Revitalization Task Force was first created, maybe about 6 years ago, we were invited to the Rotary Club in Greenville, Mississippi. And I spoke, and after I spoke, a young white male had migrated from Greenville to Houston because he couldn't find a job. And his question was to me, what can y'all do to create jobs so that young individuals won't have to do what I had to do? Had to move out of Greenville to Houston, Texas to get a job. So that is what the Robert Clark Political Institute is all about, is making life better for the have-nots. And it is time for us to face facts. It is time for us to realize who we are. I would imagine every one of us in this room today realize who we are. But there are many of our sisters and brothers out there that don't know who they are because they have never been taught their history. They have never been taught African American history, and they don't know who they are. And I can tell you that for a fact because I still live in the country among those folk who are good folk and great folk, but they just got to have some help. They've got to have some direction. And what I am saying, I'm calling upon the government for the 100 years of slavery and 100 years of dehumanizing after the years of slavery, and the inequities, the social and political and educational and economic inequities that was inflicted upon us because of that. I'm calling upon everybody, all organizations, to let us come together and let's look out for what is best for African Americans in the state of Mississippi and how we are going to move forward to be productive citizens. And when we do that, we are going to be looking out for the good of the entire state of Mississippi. There is no way that we can work for the advancement of one section of our population and leave the other section out. And I am also calling upon our institutions of higher learning to get involved. For example, I just told you, I live on the farm. If I have a problem with some grass that I can't get rid of, I can call somebody from Alcorn State University, Mississippi State University, and within a little while, they'll show up on my farm. And they'll give me the direct formula how to do it to take care of that grass. Well, that is great that they are doing that. But why is it that our institutions of higher learning cannot do the same thing for a human being? How much more valuable is a human being than a hill of grass? And it is not anything unusual for me to call upon the universities to do this, because many of the universities in the Midwestern states have done exactly the same thing. Where they had extension services, when the farmers no longer needed them, they changed that into human development. So I want to thank each of you for being here with us this evening. And as we go through this evening, we're going to ask you to join us in making Mississippi what those great civil rights leaders that have gone on before us would want Mississippi to be. Thank you very much, and may God bless you.
As Speaker Clark mentioned, the group of panelists you see before you here met today to begin the discussion of a new institute, the Robert G. Clark Institute, meant to be an organization that would provide academic research and support for activism. And your being here today makes you part of the very first discussions at the beginning of that new institute, and it is something that we are very proud to be able to support and to facilitate through the Margaret Walker Center. There are a couple of people that I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge who are with us tonight. And first and foremost, I think it would be appropriate for us to acknowledge and to welcome Mrs. Clark, Speaker Clark's wife, who is with us tonight. As well as the new leader of the College of Liberal Arts at Jackson State University, our new dean, Dr. Lawrence T. Potter, Jr., who is with us tonight as well. The Robert Clark Symposium is part of the Medgar Evers Ella Baker Civil Rights Lecture Series, sponsored by the Fannie Lou Hamer National Institute on Citizenship and Democracy. And our moderator tonight, Dr. Michelle Deardorff, is one of the founding members of the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute and also interim chair of the Department of Political Science. And I introduce you to Dr. Michelle Deardorff.
Good evening. So we're excited today to have a panelist of people who all, in one way or another, have been very involved in the life of Mississippi and the lives of African Americans, who have sought in different ways to make our society a better one, a more equitable one, and one in which it's not only better in terms of our relationships with each other, but better in terms of the structures and the way in which our government, its economics, its politics, its legal system, its government, its schools, protect its citizens. So I'd like to introduce them all briefly. I'm going to start from your right. And I'm going to ask each of them to take about 5 to 7 minutes to talk briefly about what they would see the agenda of this think tank as possibly being. And then after that, we're going to come back and we're going to open it up for everyone. Because this is the time we want to brainstorm, we want to come up with ideas, we want to have a sense of what would be the scope and potential of such a think tank. So I'm going to begin with Dr. Joseph Stevenson. And those of us at Jackson State know him well because he was our former provost and distinguished professor in higher education at JSU. He then went on to Mississippi Valley State University, where he also served as provost and professor of social science. As he's been in Mississippi, he's founded such institutions as the J. Gears Research Institute, the Executive PhD Program, the Delta Research Triangle, and I could go on and on. He's currently teaching classes in the JSU ePhD program on organizational change and human relationship building, which he's working on with K-12 and higher ed institutions. Next to him is Mrs. Alita Garrett Fitzgerald, and she is the director of the Children's Defense Fund, Southern Regional Office, and this is the state's lead. As you know, Kellogg's investing a lot of money in Mississippi right now, and she is the Kellogg-funded Supporting Partnerships to Assure Ready Children's and Kids Initiative in Mississippi, and she's one of the leads on that. She also serves as the regional administrator for the Southern Rural Black Women's Initiative for Economic and Social Justice. Within her expansive experience, she served as the executive director of the Children's Foundation. She's worked as a project director for the Southern Regional Council and with the Department of Agriculture's director, she was the Department of Agriculture's director for governmental affairs. Next to her is Mr. Jason Hardeman. He is a native of Jackson, a senior biology pre-veterinarian major with a minor in chemistry. He is also the Mr. Senior for the class of 2013 and also the president of the NACP chapter at Jackson State University. What I found interesting in his biography is he also noted that he has over 700 community service hours, and that's something he takes great pride in, and we're pleased with that. And next to him is someone who we drafted for this at the last minute. Dr. Osmond joined us and he for the session, and he kindly agreed to join us on the panel. Dr. Steve Rosman is professor of political science at Toulouse College, where you've been for
41 years.
41 years. I think that deserves a round of applause. And he's also the director of the Center for Civic Engagement there, which works on many projects. I know I got the title wrong.
Yeah, Center for Civic Engagement and Social
Oh,
Responsibility.
sorry, and social responsibility, which is important to tie them together. And then next to him is Mr. Sean Martin. And Mr. Martin is a graduate, I have to say this, at Jackson State University, graduate in political science. There are many political science students here, so we can say salute. He also has his JD from the University of Mississippi and is currently the Special Assistant Attorney and Director of the Child Desertion Unit and Mississippi Attorney General's Office. So let's welcome this panel. Dr. Stevenson, would you begin the discussion?
Sure.
Yes.
Hear me? Good evening to everyone.
Good evening.
I want to give you a little bit of history. Some of the students here may or may not know about the history of this building. Prior to it being erected, we negotiated from Ole Miss the transfer of the engineering graduate school to Jackson State in about 2004. So you're sitting on property here that took a lot of negotiations with Ole Miss, as Ole Miss today, as you know, continues to struggle with equality. The think tank, I think, should take some of these historical areas that we are now studying in our African American existence and bridge it with the future. I also believe that the think tank should have an emphasis on action research. I believe in qualitative and quantitative research, but I think its resolve is not coming soon to us when we have long, exhaustive, deliberative studies that provide us with the solutions that we already know about. We already know about the issues surrounding teenage pregnancy. We already know about the plight of black boys and men. We already know about the conditions of employment and other areas that are related to education and economy and science and all the areas that exist around our surroundings. But how often do we take the research that we know and actually create resolution and solve problems and conflict and create conditions for future generations? So I see the think tank as bridging the past with the future.
Good evening.
Good evening.
As you heard, my name is Olita Mary Fitzgerald, and I just want to give you just a little caveat. I grew up on a farm in rural Madison County, just outside of Canton. And I grew up in a family that that was closely aligned with then congressional candidate Robert Clark, and before that when he was in the field of education. And I also want to acknowledge the new generation of Representative Brian Clark. So I'm kind of transcending generations. I worked with Speaker Clark in the early years to bring school breakfast programs to the state of Mississippi. And I'm working with Representative Brian Clark to try to hold on to everything that Speaker Clark helped us to get. We've often talked about think tank and how useful it would be, and I've I have to say too that the Children's Defense Fund is a 40-year-old child advocacy organization that actually got its start here in Mississippi. My boss is a woman named Marion Wright Edelman, who was the first black woman to pass the bar in the state of Mississippi, and she continues now to lead this organization. I just wanted to get that out there, heavy Mississippi roots. But we often talk about, actually, in some ways we have referred to it as once upon a time when we were Negroes. And how, in many ways, we have slipped so far back from that. And how in our history, there has always been people who had discussions about what was right for the race. Whether it was Booker T. Washington, or W.E.B. Du Bois. Somebody was talking about it. Somebody was planning it. Somebody was engaging the population and the race to say, what is it that we need to do? Fast forwarding 7 minutes is really a difficult time for me to do anything. But fast forwarding, and when Fred Banks was in the legislature, and how much more, I think, Brian, they were able to do in their small numbers than we are able to get done with the large number of black elected officials that we have, one, in the legislature, and two, statewide black elected officials. Our children are in schools that are crumbling and failing. And we talk about racial equity, but the majority of the children who are failing are in school districts where everything is black, where the superintendent's black, principal's black, school board's black. So, and many of our communities, except for those of us who, by the grace of God, have managed to figure out a way to self-sustain, to sustain ourselves, many of those communities don't have the resources or the access or the attention from anybody responsible for creating jobs. So look, those communities have pretty much been written off. So I say for the think tank that we need to look at, one, how our families are crumbling and what we can do to hold ourselves up in the mirror to ourselves and not have other people talk about it. Two, we need to figure out what we need to do to help our school leaders be better leaders and better able to educate our children, regardless of where they're coming from, because we can't wait for that to change. And we need to figure out how we can have self-determination, because without self-determination, there can be no equity, and we can't wait on the Mississippi Department of Economic Development or Development Authority to help us. We've got to figure out how to make a living in different ways. Many of the areas where we live in this state are areas where NAFTA has taken the jobs and they're never coming back. So we have to figure out what does the new economy look like and how can we create that internally.
Hello everyone, my name is Nerd. Okay, hello everyone, my name is Jason Hardiman. I'm a senior here at Jackson State, NAACP president. Just want to keep it short. I just feel that we need to identify the key points of the issues in Mississippi blacks, and it is by this act that we can become the vehicle of a brighter future for black Mississippians.
You've all heard the slogan or the motto, "It takes a village." I think this is very important now because families have in many cases broken down. Peer group pressure sometimes takes African Americans, the males, in an unproductive direction. Often there are health problems. Mississippi is the fattest state in the union, and African Americans are even fatter than the whites in many cases. So it's a lot related to lifestyle that needs to be addressed. Health, education that was mentioned, And it's very important for the community to come together. I mean, there are many adverse conditions out there affecting lower income people in this economy where a lot of jobs are being outsourced. Poverty is increasing in many areas, and I think a lot for African Americans in inner cities. How do you deal with that? I mean, you try to create jobs, you try to enhance the education system, the health system. The important thing is for the community to come together and deal with the negativity and create the positivity. Because I really hate to see, read the newspaper, and it's not so much reported in the Clarion Ledger, the North Side Sun. There was a mugging here, there was a carjacking here, black males. This is terrible because what that does is reinforces negative stereotypes on the part of the white community. And in order to combat racism, it's important to create more of a positive image out there. So both from the standpoint of the group itself and its well-being, and from the standpoint of the response of the white community, the job market, and everything, this is very important. It's important for these problems to be tackled very early. Because too many, and I see a lot of my students, I've got excellent students who can compete with everybody, but I have a lot of students who, after all the struggles to promote freedom and opportunity, a lot of students simply aren't taking advantage of it. And a lot of it, I think, is related to self-empowerment. It's very important to look at your future, to create conditions that promote a sense of self-empowerment right from the earliest years, and to have effective early childhood education, have resources coming in, because often when students get to college, if they're programmed in a negative direction, it's very difficult to undo that. So this is basically, I think, the focus that is necessary. Work together, ferret out the negative, to deal with the crime, to deal with the negative peer pressure, and to create positive role models, have those who are achieving well at all levels, mentor those below them, and have the third grader mentor a second grader, fourth, third, etc., and infuse positivity and build up the self-image and overcome negative feelings that get instilled early and are very difficult to deal with later on. So these are my feelings, I think, as we move forward. I'm very honored to have been invited to be on this panel and to be invited by Representative Robert Clark to be a part of the think tank. And I do want to work with people, come up with ideas, share mine, and listen to others. And I think that perhaps some headway can be made in dealing with a problem that is very challenging.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Deshaun Martin. First, thank you, Speaker Clark. Do you all know who this man is?
Yes.
You just know his name, I just told you. But do you know who he is?
Yes.
Speaker Clark is the first state representative since Reconstruction. Speaker Pro Tem of the Mississippi House, the state legislature. Who was the first black Speaker of the House of the state of Mississippi, the state legislature? Hiram Revels. Someone said Hiram Revels. Hiram Revels was a good choice. He was a state senator, federal senator. Who was the second one? You smart Jacksonians. Blanche K., the first president of Alcorn State University.
Hiram Revels was the first president.
That's right. You got it. And the second one? All right. The Speaker Pro Tem is a state treasurer, y'all. A state treasurer. The Speaker asked me to be a part of this panel, and my first answer was yes. Didn't I say yes? Immediately I said yes. I'm going to do whatever you ask me to do. Didn't I say that? Making sure. I'm a lawyer. Most lawyers like to hear themselves talk. I am no different. But I will try to make it short, okay? Y'all, I sit exactly where you all are sitting now. I sat not in this building and wasn't here but at Jackson State some 15, 16, 17 years ago. I'm a 33-year-old lawyer. I was born and raised in a small town called Edwards, Mississippi, by a single parent, my mom. Who in here was raised by mom or grandmama by herself, by themselves? About a fourth of you, okay. Well, mom raised just not me, she raised 5. There were 5 of us. I'm a triplet, 3 of us, all born at the same time. Triplet, born here in Mississippi, graduated from elementary school, top of my class, graduated from high school, salute of my class. I was a nerd, graduated from Jackson State University. I'm so glad I went to JSU. Singing glory, hallelujah. Still glad, y'all. Graduated the University of Mississippi, my Ole Miss. Did you hear me? Graduated the University of Mississippi. Passed the bar for the first time. I'm in the cabinet of the Attorney General of the state of Mississippi. I'm a lobbyist for the Attorney General, and I'm a director of a division at the AG's office. I put deadbeat dads and moms in jail. In Mississippi, it's a sin not to provide for your children, y'all. But it's also a crime here. It violates Mississippi Code annotated 9753. That's the crime, okay? Mr. Clark, Speaker Clark said, well, Martin, I want you to come because I want you to show them and explain to them what a 33-year-old should be, should look like, should act like. It was tough. I want to be the first to admit poverty, abject poverty in the black community, in most Mississippi communities, regardless of color, is tough. We wore the same pair of shoes for the season. You all don't understand what I mean, but you understand what I mean. We wore the same pair of jeans so you knew not to get them roughed up too early because you weren't getting a second pair until the next season. There were times we ate peanut butter and crackers for months on end, but that was fine because Mama knew peanut butter had enough protein in it for us to survive. I want you to know this because this is what I think should be one of the key points of the think tank. We have to look at our problems, y'all, and we have to address them square on. But there's got to be a time when we can say, look, this is what I'm going to do to my problem. And I'm going to go on down the road towards success. I'm going to give up the mic. But one more thing, Speaker. When I was 6, 7, 8, 9, Mama would drop us off at Jackson State during the summers. You said, Mom, your mama dropped off a 7 or 8-year-old? Yeah. Well, maybe 10, 12, 6 and 7, upper bound, young scholars, science consortium, math, O&R. Mom got us out of the ghetto, brought us here, and said, look, Jackson State can teach you something that I can't teach you. It's going to show you something I can't show you. It's going to put you on the path. And I want you young people to understand, however tough it is, however tough it seems, you all have a leg up above the rest because you all are on the path. You all are here. You understand what I'm saying? You're here. So whatever else you got going on, at least you are where? You're here. And what do you mean? You're here learning. You're here learning to understand. You're here, you have a wealth of knowledge. You have access to libraries, computer systems. All freshmen got new iPads. You have the technology. You have the opportunity. You all are on the path. I just want you to do one thing. Stay on the path. Michelle.
All right, so we've heard a variety of different approaches to this question, and now it's time to hear from you. What we're interested in thinking about is a couple of things. As we think about this think tank, think about what could this think tank do that's not currently being done? What could this think tank do that's not currently being done? We know things need to be done. We know there's a lot of people approaching these problems from a lot of different angles. We've heard from 5 different people who are working on these problems. What is it that we can do collectively that maybe we can't do through our individual approaches? The second question I'd like you to think about is what are the questions we should be asking right now as we're thinking about creating something new that we hope will change structures and change institutions and change people. And then the third question is what agendas should we be furthering? You know, we've heard different topics brought up of things we should focus on. What should be the agendas we're thinking about right now? So now it's your turn. What are you thinking? What questions do you have in light of our panelists? And what observations do you have?
Dr. Deardahl,
Yes.
what was the second question?
My students just always mess me up because I get on them wrong. I don't necessarily remember. What agendas should we be furthering?
That was the third.
That was the third one. The second one is what questions should we be asking that we're not already asking? And those of you know, who will know who I know I'll call on you. So I'm not going to preempt. Yeah.
First question?
Oh, you want me to repeat it again? What could this think tank do that's not already being done?
I think first of all, the think tank should do a 30-day fast from TV. That's the first thing. And remove the TVs, especially in reference to young children. Take the TV out of the bedroom and get sleep. These are not complicated things, but sleep deprivation is one thing that's killing the black community. If you don't sleep, you don't think well the next day. Whatever you learn during the course of that day, it disappears if you don't get a good night's sleep. And our young people are sleeping with the television. That means that they're not really sleeping at all. And the second thing, what questions should we be asking? Not whether we should learn African American history. It's common knowledge that if you don't know anything about yourself, you can have a PhD, but if you don't know about yourself, you're not educated. That's common knowledge. And what should we be at the questions? What should we be asking? Is that your third question? What role am I playing in my own development and in saving myself? What am I doing? Am I choosing him over me? Am I more concerned about looking like you than I am looking like me? If I'm more concerned about looking like you, I'm confused. Already, Dr. Joy DeGruy-Leary, post-traumatic slave syndrome, about African Americans, 400 years of free labor, and the trauma that we suffered as a result of it. That's where we are today.
I have a question of a little bit more clarity. What is the Institute initially set up to focus on? I've heard a political piece, I heard the economic piece, I heard the cultural piece. What is it initially was the thought? I know the speaker is come from a political basis. Is that the major thrust to try to come up with political solutions? Because it seems everything else would stem from that.
The major purpose is for the advancement of African Americans. And whatever we have to do, and I've been hearing some of the things like take the televisions out and let the children, pay attention and etc. That is one. But how do we get a majority of the African Americans to be productive citizens in the state of Mississippi? Now, the ones of you that is here, that is going to Jackson State and Valley and Alcorn and other institutions, I'm not worried about you. But there is thousands of African Americans out there that is not doing that. So and what I think the group would like for the think tank to do is just give your ideas, whatever you think that will improve the conditions of African Americans. You give that to them, and they'll digest that and work with it.
Other thoughts? Mr. Jones?
I think somebody touched on this, and I think education of our black youth is the most important thing that we can do to further the black agenda. Because we all know that we have our children, even us, we have to be educated in this time, at this period of time, because of all the negative stuff that's going around dealing with black folk. So the first thing we should do is make sure that our child gets a quality education. Not only that, the parents should be involved in their child's education. Without parental involvement in your child's education, your child will be doomed to fail in most cases. And I have the opportunity to work at a school here in Jackson that's probably the oldest high school in Jackson. And I see a lot of youth that come through this school that cannot read on the 9th, 10th, 11th, or even 12th grade level. So thereby letting me know that these children did not learn to read based on the statistics by 3rd grade. That they have prison cells for these children if they cannot read on the 3rd grade level. So we have to be more involved in our children. Everything else that goes all around us, if our children are not educated, it's all for naught. Whatever else we do, it's all for naught. Because we can't, if they don't know how to read and write and articulate, they're doomed to fail.
That's so important. I just want to put reading. Conjugation of the verb to be. I am, you are, he, she, it is, we were, you were, they were. That is fundamental. What you said is 100% of where it's at. If you can't read and read for understanding, not just call words, but the reading for understanding aspect of reading produces lawyers, doctors, engineers, teachers, professors. I was, true story, 4th grade. My mom was my English teacher. She called me before the class and read this. I'm reading something, I think I'm reading, you know, enunciating, pronouncing the words properly. And she took it from me and turned it over. And she said, now tell the class what you read. Now, what you were referring to was actual enunciation of the words, but after you conquered that, even the next step, the comprehensive reading, the reading for understanding is what I lack at 3rd grade. And that's reading too. If you didn't read and you can't articulate what you read, it was all for naught. You can't read it, write it back, give an articulate understanding of what you said. Another true story, the Mississippi Bar. When I took it, 3 days. You go through our law school's hell, you graduate 3 years. After all that, you have to take another test to be certified. Three days of tests, 6 hours each day. Of guess what? Reading. All reading. They're asking you about stuff you learned 3 years ago, the first day. And they expect you to know it. That reading part is fundamental, but I'm going to give it back to you, Michelle. But I asked the first question about the speaker, about this speaker, and we got on to the senators. But what's the street Jackson State's on? The first black speaker in the state of Mississippi in the state house was?
Gentlemen asked the question about the reading. That is the problem, one of the problems that's confronting the African American community. There are many African American students starting today, and there is no books in the house, period. Many African Americans today is entering school and they're getting scolded by the parent if they try to read a book. You ain't gonna never be no good. It's keeping your head in the book all the time. I'm giving you actual things that's happening. So those are some of the problems that we're gonna have to deal with.
Can you, I would like, we do a lot of this work on the ground. The Children's Defense on some regional offices is actually working, Dr. Theodore talked about the Spark Mission. We are working in 12 school districts in the state of Mississippi, trying to align what children get in child care, Head Start, and public schools. In 2012, and to Speaker Clark's comment, if we're going to look at how we impact the greatest number of our population, then it has to be systemic. We can talk about, and it has to be whether or not we can fix everything at the home. Because in our communities and our homes have gone way backwards. And our families, when they talk about the poverty rate in the state of Mississippi, if you look at the poverty rate for Black Mississippi, it's almost half of the population rate. And when people talk about poverty rates, they really don't really get what they're talking about. Poverty rate in Mississippi, the national poverty rate is about $22,000 for a family of 4. Now, anybody try living off of that? A third of the population is living in extreme poverty, which is about $11,000, just under $12,000 for a family of 4. These are households that are under great stress and anxiety and depression, which leads to obesity and all other kinds of health conditions. Now, while we work on fixing all of that, what I would like for us to look at is, how do we take this generation, how do we take one generation and make sure that it knows everything it's supposed to know, when it's supposed to know it, so that you're creating a new line of defense. So that after that generation, every generation behind it, while you put tourniquets on, we can't fix all of this stuff. I mean, it's huge. But let me just say, let me give you an example of how simple this work is getting, how simplified it is. Y'all have all heard about the new Common Core standards for K-12. The new Common Core standard says that a child has to be reading fluently at the end of kindergarten. You can't read at the end of kindergarten if you don't have a book in the home. You can't read at the end of kindergarten if the child care center you're in or the Head Start program you're in is not lining up with what the public school is expecting. And that's what Spark is about. It's an alignment. How do we create this pipeline? So that, one, we get the children who are in the systems. Then there are a lot of children who don't have resources. Because to get child care assistance in the state, you have to be either working or you have to be in school. The poorest of the poor children, there's slots at Head Start, but Head Start can't take all of them. So you bring these children in on a kindergarten teacher and a school system that has been underfunded by $1 billion over the last 5 years with no teacher's assistant. And you say you bring Johnny from 0 to reading at the end of kindergarten, it ain't gonna happen. It's not going to happen. Let me tell you, I'm going to end it quickly, but because I just want people to understand how simple this can be. In Spark, what do we do in Spark? We work with a set number of children. We work with their parents to make sure that they understand what that child is supposed to know. We assess those children to see where they are in the learning curve. We work with the Head Start and the child care programs where we are to align what they are teaching to what kindergarten wants to see. Now in child care, children our poorest children are in child care centers that make absolutely no margins. People are keeping children. The state of Mississippi pays them about 60% of the market value for child care, for every child care that's on a certificate. So these women mostly, they don't make enough money to hire somebody with an AA degree or whatever. But you gotta have child care because if you're working, you can't pick your child up at 2:30. You gotta have that child somewhere at 6 o'clock in the afternoon. So, we've been working with a group of people, and this is a simple story, and I'm just talking about how you get to an answer. We've been working with a group of professionals that have taken the Common Core standard and developed what we call early learning standards so that you'll know what 3-year-old children need to know if they're moving along this continuum to kindergarten. So then we get to the daycare centers and we got the early learning standards, but you got teachers in there making $6 an hour, and that's turning over, that's flipping over every so often. So one thing about children is consistency on anything. You're going to show up, you're going to be there, they're going to consistency. So now what we're doing is, because we don't have the resources to go back and to train all of these people, now we're working with a group of early childhood teachers and community colleges to take now the early learning standard and turn it into a daily class plan, a teaching plan. At 9 o'clock you do this. At 10 o'clock you do this. The children got to play. They learn by play. And see, we didn't know all of this when we were raising kids. We thought they were safe, and that's what people still think. People think that if their child is somewhere safe and getting fed and being loved, that they are in a good setting. Most of our folks don't understand that education, that between 0 and 5 is when the child learns most of what they're going to learn. But that's when that little brain's snapping off. And it's not what we're talking about. It's called brain science. And what's happening in that child's brain. And why do you think at age 2 they start going crazy? They get everything is just shooting off, shooting off, shooting off. And then after 5, we start losing brain synapses. Until we get around about 30, we kind of even off, which kind of accounts for why it takes y'all so long to grow up. I'm the mother of 4, and I'm a single mother of 4 children. And age 30 is about the time, now, when we were 18, we used to be grown. But about 30, y'all start kicking in and leveling off. So, but it's stuff going on in your brain. And it's science. So I just say that to say, how do we figure this out? How do we take education and figure it out? Tell you one other thing. I have grandchildren in the Madison County School District, and I work all over the state of Mississippi. When my grandchildren went to the Madison County School District, the teacher sat down with my daughter and said, "This is what we're going to be teaching. This is the Common Core standard. This is how we're going to teach it. This is what the child needs. This is how you can help me." You get to some school districts, the teachers don't even know what Common Core standard is. How do we figure that out? And how do we make sure they get it? How do you know? So that's, I'm sorry.
No. I think we've got a very clear first agenda, right? Are we all in agreement that education needs to be something this think tank looks at very clearly, very carefully at all of the elements, from self-knowledge, from reading, from the interaction with poverty, with the whole thing. Okay? And so we have like 3, 4, 5 people, so we're going to hit them all, but this woman is very patient.
May I borrow a mic? I'm not
Sure.
the yelling kind. Thank you. Representative Clark started by asking the question, what would the civil rights workers want us to do today? And I've thought about that often, and I think they would be
greatly disappointed in where we are today. Dr. Deardorff asked the question, what question should we be asking that we are not already asking? I believe that question is, why do we not hold ourselves accountable? Racism is systemic. The lack of accountability in our community, I feel, is also systemic. Common Core standards were not readily accepted in Mississippi, as most things that are federally mandated aren't. Education comes in many different levels. Our parents need to be re-educated. I went to Catholic school. My father taught me to read when I was 3 years old. And he taught all of us from the funny paper. But that's because he cared and he was attentive to his children. We frankly don't have that. And we need to acknowledge that. Mississippi had the largest number of black elected representatives in the nation, and Mississippi's real proud of that, but also the largest concentration of black people in the nation. We have elected people to represent us, but they're not representing us. So the question is, when are we going to start holding ourselves accountable for our lack of economic success and career success? Thank you.
There were a number of other things, yes.
I just wanted to expand on what's already been said. I believe that one of the main focuses needs to be on early childhood education, because a child that doesn't have a proper foundation won't be able to succeed in their later years. So a child that doesn't know how to read or write in kindergarten, like one of the speakers said, they won't be able to do other things like write or do essays and, in later years. And this contributes to the problem to the fourth grade slump. And also that contributes to dropout rates and things like that. So a child that doesn't have a proper foundation won't be able to succeed in high school or college, and that adds to prison rates and, poverty and things like that. So it's all about teaching a child from 0 to 5, because they pick up on everything. That's why they know so many songs, and that's why, child, you see them running around just picking up on things that maybe their brothers or sisters have done, their mothers and fathers, just they pick up on everything. So if you teach them the basics, they'll be able to apply that in their life and be able to succeed later on.
I believe I want to piggyback off of what she said. I believe that in order not only to teach the children, but also to teach the parents.
Okay.
Because I was raised in a household where my parents made me learn how to read before I went to kindergarten, made me at least learn my alphabet. So I went to kindergarten above the rest of the students. So if you teach the parents how to actually to teach their children and how to be good parents, and maybe sometimes you may come home and be tired, but you take a few minutes to read with your child or teach them something that's going to be useful for them for the future, that maybe we won't have so many people not knowing what to do in their lives. And coming from a high school perspective, a lot of reasons that a lot of high school students do not want to have future education is because everybody tells them, hey, it's good to be a doctor, it's good to be a lawyer, or something that's really big. However, sometimes it's okay to tell them that, okay, you may not want to go to school for this long, but we need electricians in our community, and we need plumbers. So maybe if we tell our young people that it is not only important, or it's not only good to be a doctor or a lawyer, but to also be these other things, that we won't have so many people not going to college, and we will have a better advancement in our community.
We've got some more down here. Oh, yes, sir. Above, right above you, Mr. Jones. And then
I'd like to ask, we've talked about, our outreach as far as how to help young black youth. We've heard from the legislative branch, various agencies of the executive branch, institutions of higher learning. We've also, we know the courts have been involved as far as whether it's, issues of desegregation or civil rights issues. But one thing I'd like to ask the panel is this. beyond the scope of government, what other institutions would we consider looking at and working with to help disadvantaged youth? Specifically things like religious institutions, whether it is, say, the Catholic Church. Like I know here in Jackson we have, I think it's St. Mary's right on Lynch Street, which is a predominantly Black Catholic church, or whether it is the various denominations. What would the institution consider going beyond the public realm and going into the private realm and seeing, you know, what after-school activities are available? What is it they could do? Maybe they do it more efficiently. Maybe they do it more at the personal level. And just to piggyback on some things that have been said about education, I am a public school teacher. I've taught in Jackson. I've had 2 stints in Rankin County. I've taught overseas in China. I've taught middle school. I've taught high school. I even teach college. I'm coming back getting some graduate classes also while I'm doing all these other things. And I can tell you this, when it comes back to reading, I'm seeing it firsthand in the classroom. And it's not just among African American students, it's across the board. And, you know, we're implementing Common Core, and we're seeing our students across the board struggle with reading. They can tell you a word, well, for the most part, they struggle with that. And, you know, they don't understand the meanings of words. And one thing I'd like to see is, you know, more commitment to education, but that could be things like whether it's higher teacher pay or whether it is just completely thinking outside the box as far as commitment of our resources. So that's just some comments I'd like to add on to that.
Anyone from the panel wish to address that?
Well, that's a good point. It should not just be government. It should be any agency or organization, private, nonprofit, government that can intervene. Basically, we could deal with it on a neighborhood level. There are neighborhood associations that are concerned about security, and they should be. But if these neighborhood associations could deal with problems in the neighborhood related to learning, to education, perhaps a mentoring system could be set up within the neighborhood when students come back, as children come back, and maybe we could set up a situation where children could mentor children that are a grade or 2 below them. And this would be positive. There's the best way to learn something or get empowerment, a sense of empowerment, is if you're in a position of teaching, where you're conveying knowledge to somebody else. And so I've seen some of our students, when they're mentoring students in elementary schools or wherever, they get a sense of empowerment because they're in a driver's seat. So what we have to do is create positive experiences, meet people where they are. Sometimes we set up ideals and don't connect with where people are. And of course, you're dealing with children at very different levels of learning and experience. The key is to find out where they are and what's the next step. And of course, real learning, real education is bringing out what people inherently have within them. So if we can reach them and bring out their abilities, so to a great extent, the learning advances by teaching ourselves. We get somebody who helps promote some instruction, gives advice, gives ideas, gives tools and imparts skills so the knowledge can be drawn out. So a lot of these things, the idea is, yeah, if we count on government to do everything in this age of government cutbacks, it's not going to work. So where can the self-help, where can the village intervene to promote the development that's necessary?
I want to acknowledge this lady right here, Ms. Ellis. She brought these students from Macomb High School, a young man down there that asked a question a while ago. I think we showed that she's about 2 hour drive from here at Macomb.
So she gets the right to ask a question.
I can't take all the credit. This is the Young People's Project, and Ms. Deere, she's responsible for these kids being a part of this group. I'm an adult partner, I'm a parent, I'm a lot of things. And I just help out because, you know, sometimes young people need some more, you know, some additional support. And just because I have a child that's in the group does not mean that each one of these children don't belong to me. And I heard him say it takes a village, and it does take a village. You know, that's what we have
stem so far from is nobody wants to help each other raise their kids. And I'm a single parent, and it's okay to be a single parent. I was raised in a single parent home. But, and yes, it's okay to be a single parent, but you know, I think that children should have two parents. Don't get me wrong. But just in case that does not happen, that does not mean that the child will not be productive in society. I also know that when and see, y'all didn't meet, he introduced me so that means I can speak. When my child was small, I sent her to Montessori school. I also learned that between the ages of 3 and 5, that children learn best from other kids. I didn't know any of this. I'm a single parent, but this is what I did. You know, my child did learn how to read at the age of 5. That's why I didn't take her out of the school she was in, because she learned how to read, and I was amazed because I did. But I am a very successful adult, also parent. But you know, that's because I've learned from these children that we brought. These young people, they're not children. These young adults that we brought, and this is our future.
I just want another second about what you said about the institution of the outside institution. And you just look like a grandmother or aunt of mine, and that's why I'm looking at you. My daddy was not around. You understand what I mean. He was sometimes present, but most times absent. So I had a mom and an aunt. And my aunt was the enforcer. My aunt, family, my aunt kept us in church. Now I understand, I said, he go with that Jesus stuff. Just hear me. Just hear me. Young folks, it's good to have something to believe in. It encourages the spirit. He said, well, you know, how can it help me praying? What will it? Well, I actually believe that God cares about me and he cares about you. And it's good to believe that someone cares about you, that has the power to help you. I just wanted to stick that with you. I just wanted to say that if you don't, believing in something can't hurt a thing. I want you to say that. Yes.
Okay, this is going to be very quick. I just want to acknowledge the Young People's Project and the fact that that one of the things the think tank might do is to look at the youth groups that have formed themselves across the state. There are a lot of young people working together and see how a think tank can help them move the agendas that they're in. The Young People's Project is doing awesome work.
And even a feeder for Jackson State.
Awesome.
A connection with JSU and have that feeder filtering y'all here.
Okay, and then we had Dr. Lackey, and then I know there's 2 people up in the back. Okay, Dr. Lackey.
Thank you so much. I was thinking 1 week from tonight in the Penguin, Dr. Betty Ward Fletcher, Professional Associates with the Mississippi Delta Children's Village, will celebrate their 10th anniversary of work in the Mississippi Delta. We spent 2 years talking like we are here. Then we spent the last 8 years implementing 21 projects in location. My question then is to the think, our suggestion maybe, would it not serve all of us best if you were to investigate successful endeavors and then recommend them to appropriate agencies, whether it be government or religious or whatever, as best practices at all levels? See, what we have good things going hither, thither, and yon, but we don't have a good quilt put together of all those good things and say, this is what you can do in your place. And at this age, this is what parents can do, this is what kids can do, this is what the church can do, this is what the government can do. The
So
best
providing
practices.
toolboxes for people to.
Dr. Lackey, I could not agree with you anymore. It is not my intention for the Robert Clark Political Institute to go out and to create something new if it doesn't need to be created. But if there are good things that is being done let us come together and work together and expand those good things that's already being done.
Ashley?
Earlier, you were asking what some questions we could ask. One thing of knowing the history of the civil rights movement, it was something special that moved the people to fight and change the way things were. And I feel like that spark is missing in today's society. We're not motivated. We're not aware of what issues are going on at this moment. Secondly, about the education. Speaking as a standardized test baby, I understand that the parents need to play a role and the children as well, but our teachers play an important role in the education system. I found it very hard coming from high school being taught specific tasks. You have to think this way, you have to think this way. Now, you move to college and they're asking you, okay, so why is it this way? You don't know because you weren't taught that way in high school. And that's a struggle that I know I can speak firsthand from, coming from standardized. This is the way you teach your children. This is how we think. Now being pushed in college to think more critically, we need to address that as well.
I guess I have just a few comments to make, because we have quite a few universities here in our state. We have Jackson State, we have Mississippi Valley State, we have Rust College, we have Tougaloo College, and we have the other institutions of higher learning. There's a lot of knowledge at these institutions. There's a lot of research going on at these institutions. And particularly the institutions that are predominantly African American, you know, we're working in silos. We have people with knowledge and expertise at each of these universities, and we have problems with crime in our community. We have problems with people not opening businesses within our state, and we have to learn how to empower our people to what? Go towards economic development, because it's all about information or lack of information. And as we work on crime, as we try to understand education, because you know we have so many kids who are in poverty, and they have so much stuff going on at home, and I've been doing some research on how to improve the achievement gap. There's not any research on that. So we need to start feeding that information back into the universities so we can start learning what is going on, what the problems are, and then try to make efforts to resolve them, collect the data, and just go from there.
Thank you. All right, I think we have time for probably one or two final comments, and then I'll give you a chance. But so why don't you go ahead and speak while he brings the mic over to, we've got one person who has, anybody who hasn't spoken yet. Check for that. Oh, okay. Here's someone who hasn't said anything yet, Sharonda.
Good evening. What I'm hearing now is that the main focus should be education. But what we need to ask ourselves, why is education in the black community or any community is at a low? It's not mainly just on self-empowerment or things like that. It's also structural barriers that are preventing these people from moving forward. So you said earlier about the black people or the black children are being taught by black teachers have black principals. But say for instance with JPS, well, a lot of JPS are in school districts or around or in areas where it's high renters. And so you have your funding from your property tax. But if you don't have a good base of property tax coming in to fund the school system, then you won't get anywhere too fast.
Let me respond to that, because that's something we hear all the time. Does anybody in here think that when you pay rent, that they have not figured in the property tax to that rent base? It is. So even if you are renting, the big misnomer in the state is that poor people don't pay taxes. Poor people pay more taxes. Poor people pay 20% of the general fund. Through sales taxes.
So,
But I don't think that's what she's arguing.
but I just heard her say that there are a lot of renters and the funding is based on property taxes.
But I'm arguing that it's structural barriers. So like you have renters that's in this neighborhood, they already struggling, they go to work, they come home, they try to take care of the kids, but they don't have time or they don't have the energy.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's not about the property tax, it's not about the money, all of the money. What I'm saying is that it's structural barriers that we're not really looking at. Yeah, all we're saying that we have these problems. We have identified the problems, but we have not identified why these problems exist. So we need to identify the structural barriers that are causing these problems.
I'm sorry, I went somewhere.
Okay, back to, what's his name? Okay, back, you said something about education and the parents helping the children. I just want to go back to that because that is a good point. My mom stayed up late nights with me, helped me when I was elementary, middle school, even high school, and even when I started as a freshman here in college, Jackson State. I just want to say that is a key factor in going on and going further, because when I transferred from my private school, I went to JPS, and the principal there told me that I wouldn't make it because I didn't know how to become accustomed to the public school life, because I was in Christian school from K-3 all the way to my 8th grade year. And I went to my high school in 9th grade, and he said that I wouldn't be able to become accustomed to the high school, public school life. So I did take that, and being the strong-minded person that I am, I took that and I grew on it. And I became valedictorian in my high school because I didn't let what he said get me down. I received numerous awards in physics and English and math and all of that. And I just want to tell you all that it's not the end of it. If somebody tells you that you can't do it, just prove them wrong. And now they all are congratulating me that I'm Mr. Senior, that I'm NAACP president, that I'm everything here at Jackson State University, but they are the main ones that told me that I couldn't. So if someone tells you that you can't, just have that one motivator. Your mother, your father, both of your parents, your friends, have that one motivator that sticks beside you all the time and tell you that you can, because you can.
I know we have two last people who've been waiting to speak, and
I just want to add something else in there.
it's bad.
Because I thought you were going to go there, and when you said NAACP, it reminded me. We were engaged in voter registration campaigns, as were a lot of organizations, with the NAACP this year, and before this election. Derek Johnson's group with the National NAACP had this database, and they told us that there are 250,000 unregistered black voters in the state of Mississippi. I didn't believe it. I kept going back. I said, that can't be true. And they kept coming back. There are 250,000 unregistered voters. And NAACP did a heck of a voter registration campaign, but we didn't get nowhere close to 250,000. Now, put this in perspective. The state of Mississippi has 3 million people in it. A third of them are black. That's 1 million people. 300,000 of them are under 18. That's 700,000 people. You take 250,000 out of that, we don't know what we can do in this state. We didn't touch on that, but we've got to get back to civic engagement. And many of those are between 18 and 30. We've got to get back to civic engagement. So, I'm sorry.
Great point. Okay, two last thoughts?
Okay, our situation is a very unique situation. And if we don't approach it that way, we're going to miss the point. We're very distracted by all kinds of issues. Many of them we shouldn't be distracted by. That's my point. We're going to have to decide. We're going to have to choose what we're going to deal with. And there's so much fear, like the young lady alluded to. There's a lot of fear in dealing with our situation because of our preoccupation with so many things that we shouldn't be dealing with in view of our critical situation here. And I'll go back to where I began. Television. We are being programmed. I can't imagine billions of dollars being spent, being given to a television station to play a 30-second commercial. That's powerful. And we think that we're enjoying commercials, enjoying TV, but we're actually being programmed. And black people need to get away from the TV, and I apologize for talking so loud. We need to do this, not to interfere with your entertainment, but we need to get away from the TV. You should not sit your child in front of a TV before it's 2 years of age, because the brain just isn't developed enough. But we do, and because we're addicted ourselves, it's very difficult for us to keep our children away from it. But we're addicted. We are programmed to fail.
Okay, and then there was one person who's been very, she's right over here, very patient. So this will be the last comment, and we'll wrap up.
Okay, good evening. This has been an excellent program, and to Representative Clark, congratulations to you and thank you for all that you've done. I believe that it would one has to think of the problems in terms of what man is. He's tripart. You know, we just housed, the spirit of God, spirit is housed in this body. You've got the spiritual component, you've got, which the church, the institution is one of the strongest institutions, probably the strongest institution in the black community is the church. But what we have to do in terms of that institution is we're going to have to change our paradigm about it. We have a mindset, I'm going to church. No, we have to change that. I am the church. There's a difference. And then we change what that body, what we as a body are able to accomplish when we change our paradigm. I believe in education. I thank God that I have a former teacher here, and she's probably one of the reasons I'm here tonight. She's a steward, and I left JPS, and I could handle it anywhere with what I left here with. And that is very important, critical. I also believe that we're going to have to deal with the soul of man. I think this is what my sister has been talking about. There is a part of us that there's a way that you teach black children. I have taught a little bit. It has to be done with and I'm not talking about just a pure rhythm, but it has to be done in a spiritual rhythm. Teaching is, it has to have life to it. And so we have to be very innovative. I think we ought to look at some of the readings and some of the material that's coming out now about teaching children, even invoking the arts, especially with our black males. How about a black, going back, and we have had it in this community before, school for black males. Pastor Kruger initiated that several years ago. I believe they ended it to maybe do a sabbatical and just do a quick critique of it. But let's look at that. That's a possibility. Also, we're going to have to, as individuals, get out ourselves and do what we can do. I know Professor on the panel because I volunteered to participate in the Tupelo Rainbow Garden. We are an unhealthy people. I'm not, we're going to have to do something about that. Some of our children cannot learn because they're purely biological reasons, what we eat. They're not going to learn it. And the comprehension aspect of it comes into play. So I think that we really, I thank you all for because it's really helped me. I helped one of my little great nephews try to impart in him the importance of education. But it takes a lot of people working to achieve what we want to do. I think you need to look at some programs that Dr. Meredith has, one of his initiatives that he wants to start. Get with him. I think he needs to be a part of this group. He has some very good ideas. And we need to think of it as a kingdom. You have something to offer, and the other person has something to offer as well.
Thank you. All right, so now we're at the end of this evening. Yeah. But I will stay here afterwards and talk to you as long as you want about your idea. I promise. We have about 5 agenda items is what I've heard, particularly education, focusing on early childhood and family education. There's a focus on, I heard, political and economic accountability. I heard youth organizing, how it works and how it can work. I heard structural issues and barriers, and how do we mobilize people to see change. So I heard those agenda items. And I heard that what we could do that might be unique is asking these kinds of questions of what has worked right? And finding where this successful programming it is, breaking it down into toolboxes, and then helping find those common factors and best practices that we can make available. So I think we've made a great start. I would like to thank the panel for coming and participating in it. I'd like to thank you for contributing your ideas. You can guess this is not the first time we're talking about it. So thank you very much, and I will be here to talk to you about your phone.
And everyone should have received an evaluation form. Please write down your comments. We're very much interested in what you have to say. If you didn't have a chance to talk, you got other things that you want to say, please fill out those evaluations, bring them to us. You can give them